Welcome to Diasporaa, the show where we share the remarkable stories of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. I'm your host, Aditya Mehta, and each week we sit down with individuals who have made the journey and explore their experiences, their challenges, their triumphs. We delve into their unique perspectives on adapting to a new culture, or in this case, many cultures, while staying connected to their roots. Today we are joined by Shashwat Sapre as a Globetrotting product manager. Originally from Bombay, he spent some time in the Middle East and then grew up in Belgium. I think the first guest we've had who grew up in Belgium. He's worked in finance in London and New York City before getting his MBA from INSEAD. And that led him to Seattle, where he has lived for the past almost a decade. And I know Shashwat through the Rainier Club. You've heard me talk about the club a lot of times on the show, where we're both members. And there's a lot to unpack here. So let's get started. Shashwat, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, Adi.
Yeah, of course. Common question for people from Bombay. Is it Bombay or is it Mumbai?
Bombay. Gotta be Bombay.
That was the fastest answer of Bombay I've
But, I
ever
was thinking
received.
about it, right? Because I was like, what would the correct answer for this be? And I remember, it's on my passport.
Yeah.
It says Bombay on the passport. So you can't argue with facts.
I joke that there's some sign printing lobby in India that has been lobbying to change names of all the cities so that they get to print more signs and make more money. But yeah, so when I speak Marathi, I say Mumbai. But otherwise, I always say Bombay because that's what we grew up knowing it.
Yeah.
And at least, Mumbai has some cultural sense, like it makes sense why it's called that. We have cities which are, being renamed to something that has like a loose connection. And I just don't see the point except to like try to wipe out the older culture and all of those things, right? So yeah, I agree. Definitely Bombay. I know you left Bombay when you were very young. So any kind of early childhood memories of the city that you may recollect?
I think the main one is Juhu Beach, right? So I
Yeah.
still remember kind of playing on Juhu Beach. There used to be all these vendors.
Oh yeah.
They had those mini, what do you call it? Like those Ferris wheels, but the guy
Oh, yeah?
would like hang.
Yeah. No seat belts.
No seat belts,
No
safety third,
Yeah.
safety third. It was great.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
recently went back to Juhu Beach and it's cleaned up a lot. So
Yeah.
the transformation, I would say, that India has
Yeah.
seen is phenomenal.
Yeah, there's more focus on cleanliness across the board. Some cities learned their lessons. Like Surat had a big plague because of like pest infestations, and then it became like the cleanest city in India.
Right.
Bombay's not had to go through something like that, but in general, I see that there's a little more civic sense than it used to be. And this was really pushed because of malls coming to India. So a lot of people asked why the same people who spit a pan on a street, they
Mhm.
don't do it in the mall because the mall is already clean.
Yeah.
So if you have a place which you really clean up, it's going to be very hard to make dirty from a mental perspective. And all the public spaces, they take a lot of effort to keep them clean now. And I think maybe that's why
Yeah.
that would be the case. I am always in favor of any public space being cleaned up in Bombay because we have so few compared to the size of the city. And that's one of the reasons I live here is because I can't go to a park at 4 p.m. with my son in Bombay because I can't get off work at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
If I do, I can't reach anywhere at that time of the day. And then there's no park.
Yeah.
And if there's a park, then the air is not nice. So, yeah, I'm also glad Juhu Beach has been cleaned up. What prompted the move to the Middle East to begin with?
It was ultimately my dad's business, right? So I was very young at the time. I was
Yeah.
probably 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah.
So my dad got the opportunity to go and build out his business in the Middle East. So
Okay.
first it was in Muscat, then
Yeah.
in Bahrain.
Yeah.
And so we were there for about 2.5 years overall. And so there I just went to kindergarten, and my
Yeah.
first schooling was in Muscat and Bahrain.
Yeah.
And I went to a British school. I remember that very clearly. Went to a British school of Bahrain, and I had a blast there. I think at that point I had a little bit of a British accent.
Sure.
And then ultimately we moved to Belgium right after that. So
And was that for the business as well?
that was for the business, yeah. So my dad is a businessman. He basically did import export of luggage goods
Okay.
and supplied them to major supermarket chains all across Europe.
Wow.
And so I asked myself, like, why did he pick Belgium? And I think
Yeah.
the reason is, one is just the ease of doing business, and then the
Sure.
central location of Belgium
Sure.
in Europe. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously right now everyone knows Belgium because of its status as the head of the.
Yeah.
But back then it was very quick and easy for him to go over to the UK, to
Yeah.
France, Germany,
Yeah.
and all of Western Europe.
That's interesting because Belgium, in the Indian context, is not a top 5 immigration destination. Being Gujarati, I know a lot of people in Belgium because of the diamond trading business.
Yes.
Antwerp has a huge Indian population. But apart from that, I hadn't really come across anyone moving there for any reason. So I'm guessing this would have been in the 90s. Was it a challenging immigration journey to move to Belgium? It's always easier when an employer is bringing you to a country,
Yeah.
but as a business person, it's always harder. So I'm sure you were not old enough to know the intricacies at that. When
Mhm.
you look back now, was it a difficult transition, immigration wise, strictly from the process?
I think it's relative. So compared to now, I think it was much easier.
Okay,
But there's probably a reason that we didn't move directly to Belgium and we had to go through the Middle East first.
interesting.
So I assume that's something to do with the business and the time it takes to set up your own business. But I never really looked into it further. But
Yeah,
you bring up a good point about the large diamond community, Gujarati community
yeah,
in Belgium and especially in Antwerp. And so it's a funny joke that, every time I was in Belgium, I'd get asked like, "Oh, you're Indian, so you must be in the diamond business."
yeah,
And nope, I'm one of those Indian people that are actually not in the
yeah.
diamond business. So my dad was a businessman, so
I get that
that was a point of
question
pride.
in Seattle that, oh, you're Indian, so Amazon or Microsoft? Or sometimes it's which software team do you work for? It's not
Yeah,
even what do you do? Are you in software?
yeah.
And then I get a bit of a kick out of like, let's play guess what Addy does. And I'm yet to find anyone who was able to even remotely guess what I do. But yeah, I can totally understand that. When you moved, were you able to get into a local school easily and quickly?
So that was actually one interesting thing. My parents always put me in an international school.
Right. Okay. That
So
makes
I think
sense.
that's actually it was pretty important. Back then there were no local schools where you could study in English, and it was
Wow.
very important to my parents that I studied in
Of course.
English.
Yeah.
That said, looking back at the way my life has evolved and where I've ended up and all of that,
Yeah.
I've had friends in the Indian Diamond community who went to local schools and their first language was Dutch or French, depending on where they went to school.
Sure.
But ultimately, like their English is just as good as mine. They've
Yeah.
gone to the same places, but I enjoyed my school.
Yeah. Was it another British international school or?
So I first went to the Antwerp International School, and then shortly thereafter, about a year and a half after, I moved to the European School in a small town of Mol, which is
Okay.
small population, maybe 30,000 people, towards the north of Belgium.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so this school is actually, European School is interesting. It's one of, I think it's like 12, 13 schools that are basically funded by the European Union.
Mm.
And the idea behind these schools is that they were meant to basically educate the children of people, of the employees of the European Union.
Okay.
And so back then, they had too many spaces and they just opened it up for general population to go
Sure.
in. And so it was really cool. They emphasized learning languages and melding of cultures,
Yeah.
basically. So
Yeah.
what was super cool is you go into school, you picked your first language. In my case, I was in the English section. You had to pick a second language and a third language, and then
Yeah.
half of your classes were in your second language, and a
Oh
couple
wow.
more were in your third language.
Okay.
And this went all the way up to 12th grade,
Wow.
and studying or going to university,
Yeah.
you had to be good in multiple languages.
Yeah.
And because everyone had to pick a second language, those common classes where people had the same second language, people were together. So
Sure.
I would be studying geography with my best friend from Belgium, who was actually German, but then other people who were Dutch, who were French, who
Sure.
were Italian,
Yeah.
and then we'd go out and play in the playground together.
That's really interesting because in India we learn multiple languages in school, but the medium of instruction is one. So in my case it was English, and I was learning Hindi, Marathi, and Gujarati. And after seventh grade, I could either keep Gujarati as a 100-mark subject or Hindi French as a 50-50 mark subject. And
Mhm.
Marathi was compulsory and not Hindi, the national language. Well, some people will hate on me for saying it's the national language, but it's one of the most prevalent languages. So the fact that you start studying subjects in other languages too, that's very interesting to me because I can understand Marathi, but I can't talk geography in Marathi or
Yeah.
history in Gujarati. Those are still in English. So that's very cool. These schools that are they multicultural beyond European nationalities, or is it mostly just European?
Yeah, so they have a quota system or a preference system, right? So if
Sure.
you're the child of a European Union
Yeah.
employee,
Yeah.
you get first preference to get in. Basically,
Right.
they're guaranteeing to have a space for you. After you get, once if you're not related, if you don't have a sibling there or anything like that, then it's open to the general public. And so
Yeah.
as long as you can pay their fees,
Yeah.
it's open to the general
Got
public. But I
it.
will say that when I was there weren't too many Indians in the school. I think I
Sure.
was one of two
Mm.
brown people
Sure.
in my class. But class sizes were small, so maybe our school was 500 to 1,000 people. But in my class of 30 people, I was one of two brown
Yeah.
kids.
and it's neither good nor bad, right? What I've noticed is that second generation immigrants, or like kids of first generation immigrants
Mhm.
in places like the US, they'd pick up a distinct American side to them, which is probably the dominant side. My son speaks Gujarati with the American accent now, and he says things like Seattle instead of Seattle, which the Indian pronunciation is. But kids who went to school in an international school in a third country, especially the Middle East, they retain the Indian identity a lot more. Do you think that is the case with your school as well? And if so, would you speculate why that's the case?
I think it makes you very adaptable, right? So at home, my accent completely changes. Depending on
Sure.
who I'm speaking to, my accent can flip between an
Yep.
Indian accent, American accent.
Yep.
One thing I've noticed, just a side note, is I told you I went to a British school, then I went
Mm-hmm.
to an American school, then the European school.
Yeah.
European school, British teachers throughout,
Okay.
but my accent stayed American from
Right.
that 1 year in the American school.
Yeah.
So going back to your original question about the culture and does it stay with you, I think it's a factor of like what your parents teach you, right?
Sure.
So in
Sure.
school you talk about different things, you want to fit in with the
Yeah.
rest of the kids. At home you're taught your sanskars and all of that
Yeah.
and the Indian traditional Indian values.
Sure.
And it does end up being a little bit of a time capsule, I would say, right?
Yeah.
When my parents had left India or their memories of India were a certain way,
Yeah.
India has progressed a lot. Small but really funny example, right?
Yeah. Go for it.
Back in the early 90s,
Yeah.
my mom would be like, "Oh, you have to dress very smartly." Like, back then women didn't wear jeans and stuff in India, but now
Sure.
India's progressed a lot. But that was I remember one very early memory that my mom would be like, "You got to dress a certain way because that's what's considered
Yeah.
smart or right."
I've seen that I want to talk about that a little bit more, the time capsule. It manifests itself in positive ways, in the sense kids of first generation immigrants in the US, they tend to be very much in touch with Indian culture. They know Indian dances. Like one of my recent guests, Mohit, he's born and brought up in Bombay and moved here when he was 14, but his wife is born here. The wife is sometimes more Indian than he is because she knows Bharatnatyam. She's read a lot of like Indian literature, which,
Mhm.
in India, you like whatever, right? You watch Friends on TV.
Yeah.
So, but in some ways, when I saw that in Canada, there were Punjabi communities that had been there for 60, 70 years, and their view of India was a completely outdated view. So they were not necessarily in touch with the culture. I mean, they were, but their image of India and their impression of India and Indian people was stuck in that time zone or time period. And that I found was detrimental to how they would deal with Indians, how they would deal with India, and what their perceptions and kind of misconceptions were as well.
Yeah.
So they would say something like, "Oh, in India, you know, so and so happens all the time," and you're like, "I don't know a single person who thinks like that in India, right? Because that may have been the case in my grandfather's generation,
Yeah.
but they still hold on to it as a concept." Was the fact that you're Indian a matter of curiosity in your European school, or was it just not relevant at all, or was it a source of ridicule? Where was it on the spectrum?
I would say that it changes, right? I mean, initially, kids as they get older, they mature as well. So if you're asking, was there a little bit of bullying or anything
Yeah.
like that? Not really. I mean, if you know about, Europeans kids, they tend to be pretty tall.
Yeah.
So I was always on the shorter side
Sure.
as compared to them, very average for an Indian person.
Yeah.
But so they would say, hey, like, "Well, how come you're not as tall as us?" Or things like that. But
Yeah.
then
So it
later
wasn't
on,
related to being Indian per
no,
se.
not really
Yeah.
Indian. No, it was never about color of skin or anything like
That's
that.
good.
Just, but you're a little bit different and you want to fit in. And
Yeah.
so there's always a little bit of that. Initially, maybe the accent, they would comment on it,
Sure.
but afterwards it just becomes
Yeah.
normal. And especially once they see the values that you bring to the table,
Sure. Yeah.
you make friends and you settle in.
My son has a reverse situation because he went to a Montessori, which was an Indian immersion school. So 80% of the kids are Indian. And they celebrate Halloween and Diwali. They learn English and Sanskrit, and they learn about life here, but they also learn about yoga. So now he's going to kindergarten where he's not in the majority for the first time. There's maybe 4 or 5 Indian kids in the 20 student class. So I'm excited to see what he picks up now,
Yeah.
because within the Indian community you're still picking up similar kinds of things, but this is going to be interesting to see if and when you have kids. Will the Indian identity dominate when it comes to downloading culture and values, or will you mix it up with a pan-European identity or an American identity, or is that something you've not yet consciously thought about?
I'd like to think that I would take the best of each
Yeah,
culture,
yeah,
right? That's, I think, what we aspire to do.
yeah,
My dad always said, like, don't take shortcuts and focus on studies. So the
sure,
studies come first. I think that's a good mindset.
yeah,
There's this traditional Indian way of thinking, like, if you have to become a doctor
sure,
or an engineer or a lawyer, and if it's not that,
yeah,
then, go
yep,
or bust. I don't necessarily believe in that.
yeah. My brother's a stand-up comic,
Hey,
and
my brother's a stand up comic as well.
oh yeah, and he was asked to do one real degree,
Mhm.
before he dives into comedy, for this precise reason that if it fails, you need to have a solid backup. So he's a lawyer by education.
Yeah.
He went to the one school that would let him not attend lectures
Mhm.
and not have attendance requirement. And so, yeah, at least on paper, he has a profession. But thankfully for us, it was more like whatever you want to do, just make sure you're the best at it.
Yeah.
You're doing as good as possible in that field. So if you want to be a barber, be a darn good barber. But yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of pressure to have those kinds of. For us, we've focused on throwing everything at him and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
So he's gonna go to a Dandiya festival next weekend,
Mhm.
but the week before we're going to a baseball game, and the week after we're going to a monster truck rally. So we're
That's
trying to mix everything up,
Yeah.
and whatever he likes, he can pick up. Same with extracurriculars. Just try, ice skating and martial arts.
I think
And
that's the right way to think
yeah,
about it. I was fortunate to have parents who did the same thing with me. They would be like, okay, you got to try tennis.
yeah,
You don't have to stick with tennis if you don't like it,
yeah.
but try it.
They're not
Try
trying to live
basketball.
their
Try,
aspirations through you.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
it wasn't like, oh no, you
yeah,
have to play piano and you will
sure.
be a pianist as
Yeah,
well as be a professional
yeah,
footballer because
yeah.
we're
I
in
look at
Belgium.
all these extracurriculars as a holistic development tool because everything is so competitive that if you put your kid in chess thinking he's going to be the next grandman,
Mhm.
that's a lot of undue pressure on a
Yeah.
5-year-old.
That's
So,
what I think that the value system here does a really good job of
yeah,
because ultimately that drive has to come from within. And that's one thing I've noticed, looking back at the journey, like everyone, even in school, right?
yeah,
The kids that you thought, what are they doing? They're just
yeah,
messing about in class. Later
yes,
on, you see, man,
yeah.
people turn out okay, especially once that
Yeah.
inner drive comes about.
My
Everyone,
wife and
everyone
I
sorts themselves out.
talk about this so much. She feels that this is the other extreme where there's zero competition and like, India is ultra competitive. And we had this some extracurricular provider come to school and they're like, "Oh, we make your kids do all this in a non-competitive environment." And my wife's like, "What's the point?" But I told her like, "You got to go to college here to see how competitive and how the brightest minds,
Yeah.
are competing." So that was good. Let's take a short break here. And when we come back, I want to talk about your life after school and the early stages of your career, and move into your MBA after that. So we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Diaspora on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. We are talking to Shashwat Sapre, who is a product manager at Amazon and a fellow member at the Rainier Club, where I am. So, before we get back to talking to Shashwat, I want to take a moment to remind you to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. You can find all our episodes in video form there. So, Shashwat, what did you do after you finished your university?
After university, so I was in London. So back then, in 2011, right, it was post financial crisis,
Yeah,
but there was still a huge craze to go into financial services, investment banking,
sure.
right? All the Indian movies, everything. Mera beta investment banker banega.
Which
So
means my son was going to be an investment banker.
so that was it. That was what everyone talked about on
Yeah,
campus, and that's what I wanted to go and do.
yeah,
So yeah, I ended up joining Deutsche Bank as a essentially a product manager, working closely with with the trading desk and everything to develop
financial
ways
products or tech products?
tech products. So I was
Okay,
always on the tech side of things.
okay,
And actually, it's interesting. When I joined Deutsche Bank, they asked me very easy, simple question on the first day. They're like, "Do you want to become an engineer, go the software engineer route, or do you want to go and become called a business analyst,
sure,
product management route?" And I was like,
yeah,
"Oh, I don't know if I want to do an engineering, a hardcore engineering job." So I decided to become a product manager,
sure,
think analytically about products and how to make them better.
yeah,
And so that's what I did at Deutsche Bank. Yeah, so my job was essentially to create software to give the bank a competitive edge in the markets.
sure. And I'm guessing you would have been a naturalized citizen of Belgium by then?
Yeah, by that time I'd lived in Belgium for more than 10 years.
Okay.
So we naturalized. That made university and the whole job scene
Yeah,
significantly easier.
sure.
And it's
Of
actually
course.
something that I wasn't really aware of back then. I didn't
Yeah,
give it the credit it deserves.
yeah,
After, moving from Europe to the US
yeah,
and going through that whole process,
yeah,
that's when my eyes really opened to how
yeah.
challenging visa situation and everything can be.
So there's countries like Belgium and for me, Canada, where it's not so easy to just move there, but once you do, there's a clear path to
Yes.
citizenship. And then there's countries like Bahrain where everybody can get a employment visa, but you're never going to naturalize and become a Bahraini citizen.
Correct.
Almost never. And the US is stuck in this weird spot where it's hard to get in and hard to naturalize both.
Yeah.
And
Especially for people from like us who are
yeah,
born in a certain
yeah,
place,
yeah,
country
born
like
in a
this.
certain place, but I mean, we're 1/5 of the world's population. So it's a problem for a lot of the world's population. So then in the UK, I think it would have been pretty straightforward. What challenge did you specifically face when you moved here? Was it the H1 family of challenges, or was it the L1 family, or something else
Yeah, so I'm going to
altogether?
be honest, I knew nothing about the
Right.
UK or the US
Yeah.
immigration system
Yeah.
before I moved here. So I actually transferred internally with Deutsche Bank. I always
Right.
wanted to work on Wall Street,
Right.
and I had an amazing manager back then, and he's like, "Hey, you want to come to New York?" And my eyes lit up. I was like, "Yes, of course I
Of
want to
course.
work on
Yeah.
Wall Street." So yeah, he made it happen. And then when I got here and I was talking to my friends that I made here, they're like, "Hey, so what are you gonna do?" I was like, "Oh, I'm a Belgian citizen. It'll be fine." I was on an L1B visa at the
Yeah.
time, and so that's
Join
when
the club.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's when they told me, "Hey, he's like, really? I don't think you can change jobs
Yeah.
with an L1B
Yeah.
visa."
Exactly.
And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm a Belgian citizen, so I'll get my green card in like whatever 3 4
Nope.
years."
You're born in
And then
India.
they were like, "Oh no, it depends on your country of birth,
Yeah.
not your passport."
Yeah.
And that blew my mind.
Yep.
Completely blew my mind.
Yep.
So I did a little bit of digging and I figured that out. I validated what they told me, and I was
Yeah.
surprised. And so
Yeah.
that's when I realized the importance of planning and doing your homework.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so I had to figure out a path forward.
And this is particularly complex because these different visas have different. Can you change your job? Can you change your job within the company? Can your spouse work? Do they need permission to work, or is it automatic? Is there a path to citizenship? Is there not?
Yeah.
So I moved on an L1B just like you. Amazon's lawyers convinced me that I would not qualify for an L1A. And if I'd maybe waited for a few more months and got a promotion in Canada instead of, I got one 2 months after moving here.
Yeah.
So I could have gotten it in Canada
I
and
was in
come
the
on a,
exact same boat.
yeah,
Right? If
uh,
someone had told me, I would have
yeah,
insisted on coming on an L1A.
yeah. So there would have been a path, but then what drove me crazy was that now my getting laid off would result in me having to leave the country because on the L visa you can't switch employers.
Yep.
And that stress was too much. And that's eventually what led me to leave Amazon. Because in Canada, we landed as permanent residents, became citizens. So it was never a case that and being from a business family, I'm not insecure about my job. If you want to fire me, I'm confident in my ability to go do something else. But if that firing comes with a 60-day meter, when you're at work signing 30-year leases for Amazon and in personal life signing a 1-year lease or putting your kid on in a 1-year commitment to a school, that was very scary.
Yeah.
And I had a guest here who is on an O1 visa. That's called the Einstein visa.
Yep.
And he's a doctor from India. He's got a master's in public health from Harvard. He's got an MBA from MIT. He's a CEO of a private equity held company. And he says, I have to keep proving over and over again why I deserve to live in this country. And it's kind of a shame because there's so many highly qualified people. And I would dare say like that the way the Chinese built the railroad in the US, it's the Indians and to an extent the Chinese were building all the digital infrastructure. Everything is built and maintained by people on H1 and L1 visas.
Yep.
I mean, not everything obviously, but if there were no H1 workers tomorrow, you would feel the impact in a big way. So it's kind of a shame because everyone wants to move here. This country is great at sucking up the best of the talent from all over the world and then not kind of keeping them here forever. And when I was living in Canada, I saw a huge influx of Indians from here moving there. We're taking pay cuts of sometimes 50%,
Yep.
but saying at least we have a peace of mind that we're not going to have to leave the country. Like we couldn't buy property because we were nervous. What happens if the,
Yeah.
rules
I
change
have
tomorrow?
friends who have done the exact same thing here in Seattle. They're in the line waiting for their green card,
Yeah,
and they're like, you know what? I can get a PR for Canada. It's super easy to do. We're
yeah,
super qualified.
yeah.
Doesn't take that much time.
Mine
So
took 3 weeks.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so they're like, you know what? It's a good backup plan.
yeah. I see a lot more Indians from the U.S. there than I used to, and they're closer to expats than they are immigrants, right?
Yeah.
And they're not struggling. They're not trying to do survival jobs. They're
Mhm.
moving with the Amazons of the world. They have lots of money they brought over,
Yeah.
and they're implanting as very wealthy citizens of the new country, which is great for Canada because that's the type of immigrant any country would want, who's educated and immediately contributing to the tax coffers, so to
Yeah.
speak, and being educated and not having a lot of dependents and not bringing 5 people along with them. So it's been Canada's gain. In fact, I think they give automatic work visas now if you have a H-1B visa to the US.
Oh, really? Oh,
That's how
that's pretty
hard they're trying to poach the talent
good. Yeah.
over. So after New York, you decided to do an MBA. So what took you back to Europe for the MBA, given that there's a few good schools here too?
Oh, yeah. There are
Yeah.
there are good schools in the U.S. Really, it was the fact that INSEAD reminded me of my European school.
And you were in Fontainebleau campus?
I was in Fontainebleau, so
Okay.
the France campus. We
Yeah.
also have a Singapore campus.
Yep.
But I knew I wanted to either work in London or come back to the U.S. on
Okay.
an L1A this time, so do it
Sure.
right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be in the Fontainebleau campus, and INSEAD just reminded me of the melting pot that my European school
Sure.
system was. My high school was like same thing. INSEAD has this quote unquote rule where they have the class is made up of no more than 10% of population from a certain background,
Any one country.
any one
Wow.
country. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a mixture of
Interesting.
Indians, Chinese, Europeans,
Yeah.
Americans,
Yeah.
and it just makes for a very diverse and
Right.
fruitful conversations and discussions.
Yeah.
The other thing is like when you're in business school and you're studying cases, INSEAD makes it a point to study cases from around the world.
Sure.
And I was very fortunate to have done an exchange program at Wharton Business School in the U.S. as well as part of my
Yeah.
MBA at INSEAD. And that was one of the big differences that really stuck out to me is at Wharton, we were studying a case, and I actually asked the professor, I'm like, hey, how do we also do, European cases or Asian cases? And they're like, well, here the main focus is on teaching our kids to be successful in America because America itself, you have to give it to them, is a huge market.
Sure.
So, but the focus is on American business cases,
Yeah.
whereas in INSEAD, it's on the world. And actually, I think the slogan for INSEAD is the business school for the world.
Yeah. So I have 2 points here. I would go to Indian School of Business in Hyderabad as a executive education student when I was working in my family business. I didn't have an MBA at the time. These were like 1 week courses for executives on strategy and sales and whatnot. And we didn't do any Indian case studies. It was all American, some European. So I told my professor, why don't we make my company a case study? And I spent 2 or 3 years being a guest lecturer at ISB, where in a Salesforce strategy class. And the professor, his name is Prabhakan Sinha, he is the CEO and founder of ZS Associates, which is the biggest
Yep.
sales consulting company in the world. He was the professor of the course.
Nice.
So my company was a case study there. And I would go there, all these executives ripping apart the company strategy. And then the professor would say, oh, why don't you ask one of the, founding families? He's sitting right there in the back. And it was a lot of fun. But even in early 2010s, there was, despite having world-class schools, we didn't have any local case studies. So I can see what you say there. Also, I went to London Business School, so I had a very similar experience as yours, and it was 89% international.
Yeah.
They didn't have this rule of 10%, but what sweetened it for me was, and I think in the US schools it's going to be maybe 30% international, not more
Mhm.
than that. So here they had a London campus, they had a Dubai campus,
Yeah.
and they had collaborations in New York and Hong Kong. And we could do our electives anywhere. So I was in the Dubai campus as my base campus. So I would go there for 1 week every month. I would meet people from the Middle East. I can tell you what country they're from based on the headscarf.
Yeah.
I would meet people from Central Asia. There are people coming in from Nigeria, East Africa. And then we would do electives in London. And now you're sitting in the same class as the Norwegians and the Germans and the French and the Spanish.
Yep.
And then you take an elective in Hong Kong, and you have people from mainland China, you have people from Singapore and Japan. And I didn't get a New York elective, but then that would have been a completely different ecosystem.
Yeah.
Now, in the electives, you have the Masters in Management, you have the full-time MBAs, you have the Sloan program, which is the even higher than executive program. The average age there is like 47.
Yeah.
You have exchange program students. And for all of these, you have one batch behind you, one batch in front of you, and your batch. So potentially, you could have people from 50 different streams in one class. And that kind of diversity just blew me away. I attended my orientation, and then I went back and I quit my family business. And my parents were like, "What are you going to do after this?" I was like, "I don't know, but I know I don't want to do this." And then eventually I transitioned to startups and figured out my life. But it was quite, for lack of a better word, intoxicating for me.
Yeah.
Having been in Bombay in family business, insular, doing one thing for 6, 7 years, and then your study group has somebody who's a CEO of a stem cell research company, a Kuwaiti billionaire, some person who's an engineer in a building like these huge engineering projects worldwide. You have the CMO of Disney Middle East, and you're like, dude, what am I doing with my life? It
That's
was
right,
almost
yeah.
imposter syndrome to start with. And I think like INSEAD would have a very similar experience to that.
100%. It was very similar. I mean, in my study group, there was Chinese management consultant. There was a guy from France who was working at Moelis & Co, investment banker, basically.
Yeah.
There was an American girl who I think was in marketing of some sort. But
Yeah.
there's very diverse backgrounds. And
Yeah.
just getting to interact with people from such different backgrounds who
Yeah.
all want to go into business and
Yeah.
just feeding off of each other, I think it was great.
After that, did you join Amazon directly in Seattle, or was it in Luxembourg or one of the other?
Yeah, no, I joined Amazon straight in Seattle, right?
Interesting.
Right after INSEAD.
Yeah.
Originally, I wanted to go into consulting, but then this opportunity came up with Amazon that was just too good
Yeah.
to pass. And for me, it was actually a very like special opportunity. It was my first role in Amazon.
Yeah.
Basically, got the opportunity to build out Amazon's first toy subscription service.
Okay.
But what made it very special is that it was a STEM toy subscription service.
Okay.
And it was my way that I thought this is my background is both in financial services,
Yeah.
building stuff for banks, and so my way to kind of give back, right?
Sure.
My parents put a lot of emphasis on STEM for
Yeah.
me, and I
Yeah.
just love tinkering with stuff. And I
Yeah.
thought, if I can make kids interested, engaged in STEM and sciences and engineering and all of that,
Yeah.
then this could be really
A
cool.
place like Amazon lets you have impact at scale that is very hard to match anywhere in the
Yes.
world.
And whatever your fancies are,
yeah.
if you were into robotics,
Yeah.
they've got a team for that. If
Yeah.
you're into space, they've got a team for that.
Sure.
If you just want to do AI or sell groceries
Right.
or supply chain logistics,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate to kind of bounce around in a couple roles within
Yeah.
Amazon.
I have friends who have been in Amazon 12 years,
Mhm.
15 years, and they're like, yeah, when we get bored, we just pick up and go to a different team and do something completely different.
Yeah.
I joined Amazon because I wanted to round out my family business and tech startup experience with working at scale and validating whether I'm cut out for corporate life or not. And it was very clearly validated I'm not cut out for that. And so now I have a fourth type of business after all of these, which is, small business franchise.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I did thoroughly enjoy my time at Amazon when I was left alone to do my work. I'm not adept at corporate relationships, politics, navigating all those power plays, and those are a necessary part of corporate life, I feel. And being from a family business and then a tech founder, I never had politics done to me because I was the boss
Yeah.
or the boss's son or whatever. So that was particularly hard for me to navigate. And I'm glad I went through it because I learned how to do things at scale and also validate it so that I don't in the future regret that if I had joined Amazon, maybe I would have been a director or whatever, right?
Yeah.
When I was a 5, all I wanted to do was get to 7. When I was a 6, all I wanted to do was stay a 6. So it also put a lot of things in my perspective that people management isn't necessarily the path for everyone.
Yeah.
Or, getting to L7 is not the only measure of success or, so on and so forth. I have a friend who was in INSEAD and then he joined Amazon in Luxembourg.
Okay.
And then because he, I guess, preempted these L1 challenges, he went to Vancouver instead. And now he's a Canadian citizen and everything. And he works for Amazon in Canada.
Nice.
And he was my friend from my undergrad who we were kind of reconnected in Vancouver after all these years.
Yeah.
But he had a similar journey as yours as far as like going back to Europe for the INSEAD MBA is concerned. Do you have a pretty strong alumni network here, and do you continue to benefit from that even now?
In Seattle, we do have a small alumni network. There's actually a meetup, I think, happening next Friday. So I'm excited
Okay.
about that.
Yeah.
I have been not so good about attending them. In the,
Sure.
I know when I first moved to Seattle, I was really big on, well, I attended all of them very regularly. Then just, I think life got in the way. But
Sure.
I think the biggest alumni network are in the main cities of the US, I would say. So, like the
Sure.
Bay Area, there's a huge alumni network, especially on the East Coast. So,
Yeah.
that was a big factor for me, actually, just getting to hang out with the alums and just the potential candidates
Yeah.
who were going to INSEAD in New York before I actually made the
Yeah.
transition.
Oh,
That's
that's a
what
big
really
difference.
sealed. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what really sealed
I
it for
was
me.
the go-to guy in Bombay for anyone who wanted to go to London Business School. They
Mhm.
would come talk to me.
Yeah.
But when I was in Vancouver, I would go to the London Business School events in Vancouver and drive down to Seattle. So when I moved here, I already knew everybody in the alumni network.
Yeah.
So that was, I didn't do it with the intention of moving here, but it turned out to be a happy byproduct. Let's go into a break now. And when we come back, I want to talk more about your time at Amazon and your time in Seattle and how you rebuild social circles in every new place that you go. So we'll be
Sounds
right
good.
back after these messages. Welcome back to Diaspora on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first generation immigrants from South Asia. We're talking to Shashwat Sapre. He's a product manager at Amazon and I would say not long time, but mid time resident of Seattle.
Yeah, almost 10 years now.
Almost 10 years.
8 years and a bit.
So when we went into break, we were talking about the MBA experience and moving to Seattle. What were your early days in Seattle like? And that's the first, it's not the first, it's the second place you lived in the US.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I spent a couple years in New York,
right,
then I went to
right.
business school and I came back, moved directly to Seattle
Yeah,
after business school. First impressions, amazing, super green, but then also very different from New York. So there
of
was
course.
definitely a bit of shock,
Yeah,
right? Now, what I will say is, having spent many years in Europe and especially in London,
mm,
I think Seattle gets a bad rep amongst Americans, right?
yeah,
Seattle is known as this rainy, kind of overcast, and a little bit depressing city.
yeah,
But if you've lived in Europe, this is normal, right? I think we get a little bit spoiled on the East Coast where
yeah,
there's always, it could be super cold, right? So minus 10 degrees Celsius or like
yeah,
15 degrees Fahrenheit, but it'll still be
yeah,
blue skies and sunny.
sure.
Seattle's not like that, but Seattle
Yeah,
has some amazing, amazing things to do.
yeah,
Outdoorsy city. So
yeah,
I've really embraced the West Coast life over the years.
yeah.
And I don't know, I wouldn't trade Seattle for anything at this point.
So few points to make. One, most people don't get how north Seattle is.
Yes,
It's almost 48th, 49th parallel.
49, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And fascinating thing is more than 50% of Canada's population lives south of Seattle. So it's is at the same height as London and way north than even a New York or a Chicago or these traditionally cold places.
Yeah.
Second thing, being from Bombay, where we have monsoons, this rain is passive aggressive for me. Like it didn't bother me at all. The gray did bother me in the winters, but I think the summer more than makes up for it by exponential amount. And I haven't seen summers this beautiful in anywhere else.
I love that we get distinct seasons
Oh yeah,
in Seattle,
oh
right?
yeah,
And
for sure.
you as long as you have some sort of outdoor hobbies for winter,
Yes, you'll
then
be fine.
Seattle is
Yeah,
amazing. 'Cause
yeah,
if you can go skiing in the winter, the
yeah.
amount of stuff that you can do in the summer, we make it a point to do some amazing hikes at Mount Rainier National Park every
Oh,
summer.
yeah,
We always get a boat, go out on the lake,
yeah,
you know, play some music,
yeah.
eat some masala chips.
Sure.
It's a thing for
Yeah.
us. We enjoy it.
Our sound engineer Nathan sitting here knows I keep saying boats, barbecue, and baseball. That's my summer in Seattle at all times. It's always had a big city feel. I've been coming here for 11 years now, but I think it's really come to its own as like a global big city with multicultural educated population, lots of companies, lots of diverse industries,
Yeah.
and not just like manufacturing, like high tech industries. Very well connected globally. Alaska Airlines and Hawaiian have merged.
Keep launching new direct
The
routes. It's amazing.
no matter what happens with that merger, the real winner is Seattle
Oh yeah, 100%.
because of the connections that we're getting. I could talk aviation for forever, but what I want to focus on is how easy or hard was it to build a social circle in Seattle, given that there's a Seattle freeze and there's a Vancouver cliquey culture. Like these two cities are known for being cold to like newcomers, not
Yeah.
very friendly, very insular. Did you feel that? And also, how did you go about making your first few friends?
So I think it's a matter of trying, putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
And then it's also in the saying yes to the circumstances that come your way, right? It's about seizing the opportunity.
Yeah.
I'd been pretty much fortunate my entire life, right? In Deutsche Bank, I had a great group of graduate friends. And it was the same thing at Amazon as well. I was in the toys team and we had a great group of people. And I just befriended the people in my team. And I was
Yeah.
like, guys, let's not just make our relationship a work relationship.
Sure.
You know, I want to get to know you as a person, as a human being. I want to know what your hobbies are, what you do out of work.
Yeah.
And I've had some amazing memories with my colleagues there. And then, you know, as you get more and more friendly with people, you get introduced to more people.
Sure.
And it's about, I feel very strongly that you should just say yes to any opportunity, invitation
Yeah.
that comes your way.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is that if you're the new guy, the onus is also on you to take that first step many times.
Correct. And there will be times where, you know, things won't go your way, but
Sure.
you have to persevere.
Yeah.
Is what I would say.
Yeah.
And like I went skydiving for the first time in my life with friends from Amazon, my work
Nice.
colleague, and we just had a blast.
When we reached Vancouver, my wife and I realized very early on that two things. One, when we lived in Bombay, we've been there for 4 generations. If a new immigrant moves from, I don't know, Jaipur, do we reach out to that person and say, hey, new immigrant, welcome, can I help you? No, we don't care. So why would anyone here who's a local do that with a newcomer? Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Second thing was, it also matters what ecosystem you plug into. So in Vancouver, we could have gone where all the new Indian immigrants were going. But then that's a different baseline because everyone around you has a shared experience of struggling in a new country. Versus we got plugged into an ecosystem where everybody had been there for 20 years. They'd all been settled. So the conversations were very different. It wasn't like, oh, my PR is not, card hasn't come. I have to go work in Amazon warehouse. What do I do? It was more like, hey, let's go camping, to Kelowna this summer. And why don't we all take a vacation to Cancun? So it was a very different baseline. And their shared experience was different. So they told us, oh, you guys are highly educated and you speak great English. You're not clearly not the average immigrant that's coming here for economic reasons. So don't settle for this job. You should talk to the CEO of this company. I know them.
Yeah.
And don't say yes to anything below 150K. So that baseline really mattered. And we brought those lessons with us to Seattle. And it was obviously your lowest hanging fruit is your team and people who work with you. And those were my first friends. Since I left Amazon, my networks exploded because I'm trying to be the average of the 5 people I hang out with the most.
Yeah.
And I'm consciously trying to do that with people who I aspire to be like or who have got a lot more experience than me or achieved things that I aspire to achieve or whatever like that. And that was one of the reasons we joined the Rainier Club, that we want to get to know people who have been around here a lot longer and have therefore a very different shared experience compared to what we bring. And then also showing value to them in knowing someone like us who's new in the country, may not have much to offer here, but has a global perspective, has lived in multiple places like you have, and brings all those networks and perspectives and knowledge with them.
Yeah. And I would say we're very similar to the other folks at the club as well, right? Everyone
Yeah.
there is pretty well traveled, has
Yeah.
different perspectives. And I think that's really what attracted, I think, me to the club is people, like-minded people who just want to learn. I think having that
Yeah.
intellectual curiosity,
Yeah.
that willingness to travel and experience new cultures, new things,
Yeah.
and then have a very interesting life, right? It's all about learning about how
Yeah.
other people went through their life and what their greatest joys or highs and lows
Yeah.
moments were from there.
And the cocktails aren't bad either.
The cocktails aren't bad. Yes.
Yeah. We were members of a couple of these gymkhanas in India, as many families in India tend to be. And those are like a status symbol. Like, depending on where you are in the socioeconomic sphere, that's the club you're a member of, so
Yeah.
to speak. But they're not focused on learning. They're not focused on meeting new people. It's very, closed. Like, this is my status symbol. I go there, I swim, I come back. I take my friends there to show off maybe.
Yeah.
But here I found the Bellevue Cup to be a little like that,
Mhm.
where it was not, focus wasn't social and learning and meeting new people. And that's why I ended up at the Rainier Club. And some of the events and, it's been phenomenal. Like, I never thought I would learn about things like that in such an accessible way.
Yeah.
Like, we had the architecture firm that built the Seattle waterfront overpass, and
Yeah.
they went through the whole design philosophy. They went through like all these awesome challenges that they met, and it was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
So as a new immigrant who's been here for 3 years and joined, and came from Amazon, I would not have had that kind of opportunity to learn about something like that unless I was part of the club.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for that.
Absolutely. I mean, I've had some really cool experiences as well. Funnily enough, right, the best flamenco dancing that we've seen was not in Spain. It was at the Rainier Club,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
they invited these group of dancers to
Yeah,
come, and
yeah.
I think people have connections at the embassy, and so
Oh yeah,
these dancers, they danced their heart out, and it
yeah.
was an amazing show that the club put on.
Yeah, it's also for me one learning has been that old money is the same everywhere. So old money Bombay thinks and operates very much like old money Seattle. And I've always been told that India is a very relationship driven society.
Yeah.
Canada was like that to an extent, but the Americans are not like very relationship based. They're like merit based and opportunity based. But at places like these, I see that
Yeah, I
having these
think there's
connections, the relationships, all that can make a difference when it doesn't in the day to day life.
yeah, I've
Yeah.
learned that relationships are always beneficial,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
especially later on, like that's what
Yeah.
matters ultimately.
Is your plan to stick around in Seattle for the time being?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we really like the jobs out here, the weather, the climate,
Yeah.
and then just the activities, right? Like I mentioned earlier, I don't know of too many places in the United States where you can drive down to the water in 15 minutes, but then drive an hour and be skiing,
Yeah.
or drive another hour and be hiking in the
Yeah. I mean, you
mountains.
could ski and kayak on the same day,
Exactly.
pretty much. Yeah. I always say Vancouver has the personality of a yoga instructor, and Seattle is that yoga instructor with a corporate job
Yeah.
because it's more corporate than, Vancouver doesn't have any large Fortune 500 companies headquartered there. It's got few mid-sized companies at best. Very diverse ecosystem, but still.
Yeah.
So Seattle is definitely more corporate, I found, and that's generally the difference between Canada and America to begin with. Canada, you'll have people saying, "Oh, let's meet in November," and it's like September, and you're like, "What do you mean November?"
Yeah.
But it's a very work-life balance kind of city, more so than Seattle. I think I'm now spoiled where you see mountains everywhere around you, and
Mhm.
when I was in Nashville recently, I was in Atlanta, and I was like, "Where's the mountains?" Like, because you're
That
so
is
used
true.
to seeing them, even Toronto, and
I mean, even
you
if I
know,
go down to the Bay Area, right? I go to
yeah,
see California and I'm expecting to see lush green forests everywhere I
yeah,
go.
yeah,
And the landscape is
yeah,
just not that. So,
yeah. No, we're definitely apart from all the other benefits we talked about. It's also a part of the world which is relatively free from impacts of climate change. Like, there's no crazy hurricanes and droughts. A little bit of
yeah.
forest fires, but water is plentiful,
Yeah.
electricity is
Cheap
everything
hydroelectricity.
is plentiful. And when someone complains about how expensive it has become, I feel like, yeah, but that's a testament because everyone wants to come here. That's why it's
Yeah.
expensive. It's not necessarily just bad planning or, lack of housing and all. Sure, those are problems, but it's still a testament to how many people want to move here. And Bombay is like that, right? Bombay is expensive, very difficult to move
Yeah.
into if you're not a local. But any place that's desired by a lot and a source of optimism,
Demand and supply, right?
yeah, it's always going to be like that. If someone were to move to Seattle today, apart from the advice you already shared, like
Hmm.
put yourself out there, don't say no to anything, what other advice would you give them to assimilate quickly and become at home in this city?
I mean, I think people have networks, right? No matter how informal they are, I would say reach out to your network, reach out to your friends, ask
Yeah,
your friends who they know in Seattle,
yeah,
and you'll eventually come across some connections. So
sure.
never assume that you don't know anybody in a city
Yeah,
because chances are you do, you just don't know that you do yet.
sure.
So it's about finding that
Yeah.
and then just going for it.
I described that group of friends in
Hmm.
Canada, the first group,
Yeah.
which were there since a long time. My wife's one friend's younger brother was the only person we remotely knew of in
Yeah.
Canada. And I'd never seen his face. I don't know what he looks like. When he comes up for dinner, his wife was in high school with me. And I was never friends with her. She was
Hmm.
just a person in my class.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, you are in FYJC Division E." And then we had like 40 common friends, and that kind of opened up the door. And the second thing was, I just randomly went on LinkedIn and said, "Who's in Vancouver?" And there were so many people in my connections who had moved here and I didn't know.
Yeah.
And that kind of proved to be a big boost. And then the third thing we did was we joined all sorts of diverse institutions. We joined the Board of Trade. We got ourselves onto Startup Accelerator advisory boards. I was on a nonprofit advisory board. There was a London Business School network. And through all of these, we made a network which was very mutually exclusive and diverse at the same time. And that had an exponential impact onto, like, in India, you're like, oh, you're getting admitted to this hospital. I know the doctor there. When we left Vancouver, we were that in the short span of 4 years. And I particularly derived a lot of pride from being the guy that everybody comes to when they need something. So
Yes.
I've always been a super connector, and that was just an extension of that. So cool. This was a fun conversation. Let's move into our weekly segments. And Mr. DJ, let's spin that wheel and see what we land on. So we have Kabaddi. This is a new segment. Kabaddi is an Indian sport which, like ice hockey, very small part of the world plays, but the ones who play it are fanatic about it. So my segment is called Kabaddi. But we ask our guests what their favorite game or sport was growing up. So what was a board game or a sport that you particularly enjoyed growing up?
So growing up, I particularly enjoyed basketball. Now, as a short person, that was kind of funny, but I really enjoyed playing basketball. And then board games wise, I mean, the classics, right? Like as a kid, Snakes and Ladders and Ludo were the big ones.
Ludo is a very interesting choice, and I'm going to put a link in the show notes. It's basically a game of dice, and you have a plus sign shaped path.
Yeah, and you just go around the circle and have to go back in the middle somehow, right?
And get all your one after the other, get them into. So it's a master strategy game of sorts.
Yeah.
Because if your pawns can't cross each other and things like that. I'm going to put an instructional video, a YouTube video on the show notes so people know what we're talking about. I think we have time for one more. So let's spin that wheel again.
Can I do one more? Just answer one more thing?
Yeah.
In terms of
go for it.
So these were the ones that we had access to in Belgium, right? What I really couldn't wait for is when we used to go back to India, play carom.
Oh, wow.
That was so much fun. And I begged and begged my parents, can we get a carom board back in Belgium? And back then I used to just we can't fit it in our suitcase. So I wish we'd figured out a way now.
Man, I haven't thought about carom for so long.
We should get one at the club.
Should get one at the club and have all these old people play carom. It is a game of immense skill, actually.
Indian pool.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have all these different, red and black little, what do you call them? They look like hockey pucks, tiny hockey pucks.
Or poker chips or whatever.
Or poker chips. And you use your fingers and a striker to kind of put them into the four corners. Another great example, I'm going to put a YouTube link to that.
It's like pool, but played with your finger pool.
Finger pool. There we go.
Pool.
There, with a lot of chalk. Awesome. I think that's all the time we have for today. So I hope you enjoyed Shashwat's amazing story, and thank you for listening to Diasporaa. Remember to check out our show notes for links and more information about the topics we talked about today. Diasporaa is part of the Speaking Current network of shows and podcasts, all of which are dedicated to inspiring listeners to build lives of meaning, connection, and value. You can find the Speaking Current network of shows, including Diasporaa, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also find us on YouTube now. Lastly, if you know someone who has a story that can be shared on our show, please feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media handles. We'll be back next week with another interesting story from the South Asian diaspora. And until then, take care and stay curious. And Shashwat, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.